Shalom, dear friends. We have now crossed just the halfway mark in our journey with Matthew, understanding the person of Jesus. The 15th chapter that we are going to deal today begins with a confrontation between Jesus and the Jewish authorities, followed by a very disturbing scene between Jesus and a Canaanite woman. And finally, the chapter concludes with the account of feeding over 4,000 men. This chapter begins with the Pharisees and the scribes accusing Jesus and the disciples of not observing, and a more serious issue of transgressing the tradition of the elders. What are these tradition of the elders? There are a number of prescriptions to be observed that are handed down orally in the rabbinical schools, and they are interpreted as the written law of Moses. Now, these prescriptions were later codified in a written form called Mishnah that took place around 200 AD. They will prescribe details about religious observance. For example, it will tell us the minimum amount of water used for washing the hands before eating. So the minimum amount of water required will be the measure of water that will contain in a 1.5 medium-sized egg, and there should be enough water that can pass through your fingertips up to the middle of the joint of the finger. The text begins by the Pharisees asking Jesus, "Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders?" Jesus counter questions, "Why do you break the commandment of God?" Then Jesus says, "You say," and he mentions what the tradition would say, and finally Jesus says, "God said." So you are going against the commandment of God by trying to legally observe some of these traditions. For Jesus, moral purity takes precedence over legal purity. The Pharisees, for example, would twist the law in order to escape their responsibility of looking after their parents and to cater to their needs. But Jesus would quote the 4th commandment, and for him to respect this 4th commandment is to take care of the parents, especially in their old age. And Jesus would go to the heart of the issue. He says, "Heart is the residence or the factory of all human decisions, especially all the evil and good thoughts and decisions." And in the text, Matthew mentions 7 kinds of sins based on 10 commandments. We go to the next passage of the disturbing episode of a conversation between Jesus and the Canaanite woman. No other story in the entire gospel where Jesus ignores and still worse insults a person who comes to him in need. So Jesus is in a pagan territory, the Canaanite area, and there are 2 tensions. First, Jesus is crossing the ethnic barrier. Secondly, he is crossing the gender barrier. the cry of the Canaanite woman, he comes to Jesus, who says, Eleison me, have mercy on me. She calls him Kyrie, Lord, Son of David. So, the reaction of Jesus is first silence, secondly, he rebukes, and thirdly, he retorts with an insult. Let's look at the text. When Jesus says, it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. The woman gives a snappy answer, a great one-liner that will go into the history. Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. The response of Jesus is immediate. Woman, great is your faith. Jesus actually tests her faith. First by silence, then by reticence, and thirdly by a sharp word. The Canaanites were ethnically corrupt and religiously backward. But she acknowledges the messiahship of Jesus, calling him Son of David. So she is greater than the religious leaders who did not accept the messiahship of Jesus. She is greater than the apostles because she knelt down, proskuneo, a vocabulary that we have already seen, accepting the divinity of Jesus and calling him Lord. While the disciples did that after they saw the miracle. She does that even before the miracle takes place. She is greater than Peter because earlier Jesus calls him man of little faith. Jesus calls this woman of great faith. This is also a major turning point in the life of Jesus. Till now, Jesus' mission goes only to the lost sheep of Israel. From now, it will go beyond the boundaries of Israel. Finally, we come to the famous multiplication of 4,000. We just saw yesterday the multiplication by Jesus feeding 5,000. And both incidents have a lot of things in common. There's a bread and fish, both take place in countryside. But there are also major differences. The first incident took place in a Jewish area, and the multiplication of 4,000 takes place in a Gentile area. 5,000 is a Jewish number. Remember, 5 books of the Pentateuch, 5 books of the Psalms, and 4 represents a universal number, the 4 corners of the earth, for example, representing all nations. The 12 baskets that we found yesterday, representing the people of Israel, 12 tribes, while 7 baskets when he multiplied food for the Gentiles, 7 representing completeness, the universality of the mission of Jesus. Salvation is for all. So both Jews and Gentiles will benefit from God's favor in this messianic banquet. And finally, the text concludes by saying about the compassion of Jesus. Verse 32. I have compassion for the crowd. And a favorite vocabulary in the Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus does all the miracles because of his compassion. He represents God who is compassionate, God who is merciful. That's why the famous statement of Pope Francis, God's name is mercy. God's peace be with you.